Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. Delighted that you're here. Delighted we get to carry this conversation on. Today's Friday, May the 16th. We're halfway through the month, and we're just a little over a week away from the start of our 9-day residential Why Is This Happening to Me Again intensive. So looking to get forward to the group that's going to come together. Looking forward to Urate, who is a wondrous chef and gardener, and is going to be doing our food prep and doing a powerful new program called the Nutritarian Diet. So if you're ready to, the average person when they do an intensive tells us they lose somewhere between 10 and 20 pounds. And they tell us that the work they get done in that 9-day process is about the equivalent of 10 to 20 years of just doing personal work. So looking forward to that happening. And okay, let's try one more time. Miss Jeanie, are you with us?
Can you hear me now?
Oh my goodness, you are loud and clear, sweetheart.
Okay, so it works on the iPhone, but not the Android.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll have to see if we can see what's going on. But what do you have to share with us today? Aside from the fact that we've got Lincoln and he's just rocking today.
Yeah, he's full speed ahead right now, so I'm a little sidetracked, but just looking forward to the intensive starting.
Yeah, I am too. It's been too long. 2019 was our last residential intensive. So we're going to be back actually at the same facility that we did that 2019 intensive in Abingdon, Virginia.
No, you actually
9-day Why Is This Happening to Me Again?
You did 2019 at Heartland. You did 2020 at Jubilee.
That's right. It was shortly after that we did the Laws of Living. So it was 2020. Yeah.
Yeah.
5 years. That's too long. Gee, when we used to do 65 days every summer, it's too long. So I'm looking forward to that. We're going to do Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Healing through relationships, communication. Did you hear what I think I said? Purpose, personal power, and commitment, empowered to heal. Mind shifters, hands-on energy field work, and still point breathing. So if you're ready for that, join us. Come and play. It's going to be a rather small group, and that makes for more intense personal attention. So looking forward to seeing how it unfolds. So any other thoughts for you, sweetie? She says no, she hung up. Okay, cool. So let's go back to and if you're out there in listener land, just push that button and let us know that you have a thought or a question, something to process, something to share, something that's meaningful. And we're still working on troubleshooting the app. They did some work on it yesterday, and we've actually got a new version of it. So we'll see what comes out with it. No callers in queue. Be out there, put your hand up, push one. Got a thought? Anything to share with us? Questions? Anything you'd like support with? That's what we're here for. I know we've had a challenge recently with that, but we're working through it, and we're going to get it operational. So the topic of the power person behaviors. We suggested yesterday that you make a list of all of the behaviors that your power person did in your world. And I invite you to pick out one of your significant, we tend to have more than one power person, significant codependent relationship, significant power person in your life, and do as a written exercise. I think I shared this yesterday, but just to reinforce it, write their history. Sit down with all the power person dynamics in front of you, looking at the disturbances, the upsets within your own mind, the pains, the traumas, and then write the history in the first person of your primary, or at least what you perceive to be your primary power person. Write their story. as though you were them, how they were treated, what motivated them, and where did their attitudes come toward you? Where did they come from? How did they develop? It can be a really powerful way to open a space for insight. That quote that I shared the other day with of Longfellow, if we could but see the secret history of the person we call enemy, there would be enough compassion to disarm all hostility. And remember that hostility is an addictive drug. Hostility is not an emotion. If something happens and somebody instantly goes into hostility, you know that whatever it was that happened resonated something in the unconscious that's painful. And hostility is an internally produced chemical reaction that is used to anesthetize pain. It's a powerful film out there. It's an interesting watch on addiction. It's called Thank You for Sharing. It's a little bit risque, but what I found to be very powerful in watching that film, and I don't know whether it was done consciously or not, whether it was purposely done this way, but it's a story of an addiction recovery community, and people are in different stages of addiction, spouses, parents, children, friends, lovers, enemies, the whole gamut. And it's interesting because it goes through several scenarios where people are about to fall off the wagon. And in each scenario, before they, when the stress is up and the chips are down, that's when people fall off the wagon. And in each one, what they very powerfully demonstrated was prior to falling off the wagon, what each person did was turn to rage, turn to hostility, turn to blame. That's a signal that I'm trying to anesthetize. And when that anesthetic isn't strong enough, that's when people turn back to whatever their primary addiction is. Or they recognize, there's something moving under the surface here that I need to deal with. And if I can deal with it, then I have the opportunity to move through it. And as I move through it, I free myself from the need for any substance. For that, the definition of addiction that we use in this work. So, question, does fear work the same way as hostility? I think that fear is another way of, it's a way that the system warns you there's an internal thought disorder and that something or someone is resonating and being attracted to that thought disorder, which means there's going to be behavior keyed in with it. And I congratulate you for handling that hostility. That's powerful. Now, of course, as your note in the chat room says, now you've got to deal with the fear. You'll notice that when you had hostility, you didn't feel fear. Why not? Hostility is an anesthetic. As I was saying in this film, they showed in every case where somebody's about to jump off the wagon, that was that was the drug that they unconsciously chose to use. And then when the pain became too overwhelming, when that anesthetic didn't work, that's when people fell into the next level of destruction. And if you're working from choice, acknowledgements and kudos to you, Cami, that you're really stepping up to the next level of what needs to be freed. And fear, you remember in the scriptures, over 300 times it says, fear not. And what it's saying is that fear is an activity of the mind based in thought disorders in the human system that blocks out awareness of ourselves as love. It tends to be genetically inherited and played out generation after generation. And If you're the early adopter, especially if you've come from a family system that's got a lot of trauma that needs to be resolved, then the fact that there's little or no modeling for functioning as a truly realized human being, as the presence of love, it's like starting from scratch and working through it all. And that's why if you this exercise I'm suggesting, this point is that write in the first person your power person's history. Really detail for yourself how they were treated, what motivated them, everything you can imagine. And another powerful, especially if it's someone who's passed, another powerful thing to do can be just to ask them to guide you. There's a link, and I'll maybe see if Jeanie can put it in the notes for today. There's a link to a show that we did shortly after our last online codependence intensive. And one of the women in the intensive had been, well, she was actually getting ready to go to the hospital. And in preparing for going to the hospital, she was having some heart challenges. The assignment she was given in the codependence intensive was to ask her ancestors about the condition of their hearts and the dynamics around the heart. And she called into the radio show. I'm not sharing this out. If this were just something intensive, I wouldn't be sharing it like this. But she called into the radio show to share just how powerful it was to make that request. And she ended up in a major dialogue with, if I remember correctly, it was her great grandfather, and that he had come over from Europe and thought he was coming to a country where the streets were, just about literally paved with gold and life would be ease. And the fact that he shared with her that they had to literally dig a hole in the earth to have a place to live. And they grew food, and the terror at their crops failing. And I mean, it was just really powerful to have, and this was, if I remember correctly, again, her great grandfather who had passed, years before she was even born. But she was able to do a powerful, powerful dialogue with him. And writing your power person story in the first person, whether it's a current relationship or an old relationship, really doesn't matter. If you can do that writing, it's really profoundly powerful. In the comments, but I have to restart to do that. So, Melissa, when writing a paper about our person as themselves, I put down how I think they thought. Well, that's one way to do it. If you're cognizant of the fact that you're writing down your thoughts about your power person, then you're really writing your story, and that can definitely open some spaces for some insight into some of the internal healing work, some of the forgiveness work that you're going to need to do. And if you ask their permission to do it in the first person, write as them, and ask them to guide you, you may find yourself with some totally new information you had no idea was true. So that's why that suggestion is to write it as though you were them. Imagine you're them, breathe into their space and ask for them to guide you in what you're writing. It's a really powerful exercise to do. And of course, why do I want to change the power person dynamic? Many people say, well, my parents' lives worked fairly well. Well, did they function continuously out of a state of conscious, active, present love? Then I'd suggest you do not accept that those behaviors, those power person behaviors, are worth repeating. There's an old-timey song that, give me that old-time religion. It was good enough for my mother, it was good enough for my father, so it's good enough for me. It's like, if it, whatever they had, if it did not cause them to live as human beings, and remember our definition of a human is that of living is conscious, active, present love. My offering is that's what we're all designed to live as. However, if there are unresolved generational dynamics, then those generational dynamics will tend to take over. And when we're not functioning out of that active present love, we're not functioning out of who we are. To replicate past relationships and past dynamics. You go back to Yeshua 2,000 years ago, and he spoke of that as being the dead buried by the dead and the blind led by the blind. That's what he was talking about when he used those words. If we're just replicating what's going on in the past, and that's all that carbon-based memory can do. So there are two major problems with living out of the power person dynamic. First of all advice from the mind, from the storage system, is from the past, and therefore there's no life in it. We're designed to experience ourselves living as life. And the best definition I've found of life is that life is love flowing through a cell. And anything that we do to inhibit love flowing through our cellular structure means that we're inhibiting and destroying our own human lives. So power person advice is from the past. And when you look at those who, when they said the sins of the fathers, if we're disconnected from that state of being love, if we're engaged in incoherent energies, energy patterns that do not support the presence of love, then our system is going to say, ouch. It's going to say, this hurts. There's pain here. Unfortunately, instead of our culture and our world teaching us that if we're experiencing that there's something that needs to be done inside of us, that incoherent, that unstable energy, or what in the Aramaic was called sin energy, off the mark, that rather than turning those energies into pictures of other people and always insisting that the change has to come from the outside and that the pain is caused from the outside, once one realizes that the pain is caused from the inside and it's an energy that we can take charge of. Now, that's not easy if we've dissociated from it. If we've dissociated from our fear, our rage, our guilt, our hatred, our vengeance, our sadness, then it takes really sincere work to uncover those dynamics, recognize they are from the past. There's no life in them. They are not current. And when that mind, what was called in the ancient teachings, the mind of man, is subdued, then there's a space for you to enter into your own body-mind unit. And your body-mind unit, your physiology, is designed to be fueled by love. If your physiological device has been defiled by generations and generations and generations of rage and guilt and fear and terror and trauma, then you don't want to function out of being guided by anything that's in there. So what's the solution? What do? You acquire a new habit of every time any kind of hostility or fear moves in you, instead of having a conversation about somebody else, you recognize that this is an energy that's inside of me and that I want to be about being responsible for it and deleting it. So the main power person issues in your life, you want to identify those messages, those issues, and the behaviors related to them. And a good way to write their life story is just to breathe yourself into their skin. Start from the viewpoint of them in childhood, what they went through. If you don't know, ask to be shown, and then just listen. Ask to be shown what their relationships were like, what if they were married, what their marriage was like, and ask them to explain to you why they did what you did. You might be surprised. And then as you write that, a good marker to tell if there's any denial is if your children, now this is again usually a parent-child relationship, though not always, but if you've written something about one of your parents, if they were your power person, would any of your offspring write that about you? Or if you don't have offspring, imagine that you did, would they be writing any of the same things about you that you are writing about your power person? Guess what? Under stress, you are your power person. Under stress, you will play out. Unless you've got really conscious and are really aware, yes, they're going to write the same things. So in what ways, good question you can ask yourself, in what ways have you become your power person? And be willing to look deeper and deeper and deeper into your own mind. And while you're doing it, let go of blame. Let go of blame of your power person. If you've played out any of those dynamics, let go of blame of yourself and breathe. And then choose to communicate not from the power person dynamic. You are not your best self when you're functioning out of the power person dynamic. And if you're just playing out the power person dynamic, then all of your communication is just a replica of that. And that means there's no true communication taking place. One of the points we get into, and when people do the self-study of this codependence intensive, part of the codependence intensive self-study is the workshop communication. Did you hear what I think I said? Most people don't use words for what words are designed for. Most people use words to get what they want. Words are actually designed for communication. And a lack of communication is the cause of disease and death. Whatever it is that I don't want to say, that I don't want to speak, that I keep hidden and go, if I don't ever, deal with this, then I'll be okay. Well, you're on an unconscious level, you're dealing with it 24/7, 365. You want to create a safe enough space. You'll hear me say the first night of the intensive, those who've been in intensive previously, that one of the reasons why people are unable to contact and deal with the things that they most need to deal with is because it was never safe for them to do that. And one of the objectives of the intensive is to create a space safe enough for one to touch into and truly communicate what's happening inside and communicate responsibly rather than through projection. So if you had a codependent relationship with one or both of your parents, what were some of the rules that you had to live by? And were the rules different for your parents? Was there fairness in it? What were some of the ways in relationship to that power person that you found to get the attention and affection that you needed? And then ask yourself the question, if you have children, do they have to live under any of those rules that you thought were unfair, but now you're replicating them? You hold yourself accountable differently than your children. If you watch others who are not living by those rules, do you go into upset or disturbance? And remember that if you do, that's our definition of codependence. If there's somebody else out there that's doing what our personal code, what our home life looked like, doing it differently, and we go into judgment and rage, and we say, and we justify that by, well, yeah, look what they're doing. They're breaking the rules. Well, whose rules are they breaking? And where is the upset, this disturbance in the judgment happening? So if you've got this judgment and this pained energy you're holding against someone else, notice that that's a codependent action. Remember, our definition of denial and codependence are actually identical. Whenever I think or speak as though something outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, I'm in denial and I dissociate from the real cause of what's moving inside of me. Whenever I blame someone, whenever I think or speak as though someone outside of me is the cause of what's moving inside of me, I'm codependent with that. I believe that that is what is creating the disturbance inside of myself. What lessons have you learned in your codependent relationships? Is there anybody in your world, and I'm just throwing out some things to contemplate, to really look at and move into a deeper level. And as we finish up the codependence workshop, which we've been doing now for several days, I'm going to suggest you go back, take what you've uncovered here, and then start to work with that new codependence to interdependence worksheet, or pardon me, the Power Person worksheet. That's the 19-page worksheet that we covered prior to starting this codependence workshop. So take what your insights are here, take them back to that worksheet, and that will take everything to the next level. So codependency always involves manipulation. And when I want you to think you're responsible for the output of my mind, we call that blame. And what kind of, you know, um, methods have we developed for manipulating people into accepting that role? Some of that we went through in the Power Person worksheet, bullying, put downs, intimidation, sarcasm, it's the silent treatment, switching issues, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual abuse, weakness, illness, unwilling to hold yourself accountable, attack. And then, of course, having attacked most people follow that with guilt and just reinforces the blaming of the attacker. So what kind of manipulations has your power person used with you? And have you followed the inherited inclination toward utilizing those same things? Make excuses for them, keep the family secrets, lie, denigrate, scream, shout, belittle, being a perfectionist, fighting, neediness, fear, begging, intellectualizing. disapproval. Some people use meditation, for instance, as a drug. I remember I had a friend in St. Louis several years ago that was involved in this work. Met him through this work. He was there, and he was very deeply into transcendental meditation. And when I would speak in Atlanta, I would stay in his home. And it was interesting to watch. He and his spouse had a fairly conflict-ridden relationship. And every time he would have a conflict with her, the next thing he'd do is he'd go and do his meditation practice. So it was a way to avoid dealing with the conflict. Oh, I'll just go and put my fingers together and meditate, and it was a tool that he used to quieten himself down, but it was a way to avoid ever actually confronting and dealing with what needed to be dealt with. And of course, any kind of addictive behavior. And again, our definition here of addiction is the compulsive use of any person, place, thing, circumstance, substance, or activity to keep from feeling, hearing, and following your highest guidance, or to keep from feeling directly the pain of an unresolved goal. So addictive behaviors are ways of anesthetizing against the truth. Codependence involves things like attachment to power, money, things, controlling, whining, hopelessness, escaping, compulsiveness, seeing another as one source of love. Greediness, destructive criticism, dumping on someone, gossip, slander, rigidity, confusion. If any of these things come in to your mind, if you're seeing any of these things, these are all energetic patterns that when you apply forgiveness can be removed from your mind and from your physiology. Vindictiveness, name calling, stinginess, confusion, poverty, rigidity. So these are all energetic patterns that need to be removed because they cover up the truth of who we are as love. I wrote a poem some time ago. Actually, we'll get Jeanie to put it in the notes today because there's a version of it that I did. A friend of mine in Nashville had a recording studio, and I went and recorded it with a musical backdrop. But it's kind of the sum and substance of this work. That if any of these dynamics that I've just been speaking of have covered up the truth of your experience of being restored to love. So the poem goes like this. Ah, the world mistaken. The fleeting of love is not. Our essence, love created, instead, is eternal. Love, grasped that and dreamed about, but never to be gained or possessed through another. Only experienced in the luscious taste of true self, of being. The essence of another can only be experienced, touched, but not captured. It cannot be imprisoned to fulfill the dream of possession that could never be. The essence of the self, being, is the only experience of love. Your birthright is to flourish in it, to live in all its bliss. All else is illusion. Imprisoned in the cage of demand and held breath, the taste of self as love fades. Forgotten in the swirling cries of 1,000 generations of love mistaken, it disappears. Captured and bound by an unfulfilled yearning, it only appears to be smothered and dead. Foolish to think a surrogate can fulfill vanished self-awareness of what is buried beneath the noise of unresolved, unforgiven suffering and pain. What was never absent, what seems lost, the still small voice, has but been obscured by clouded perception. It is among us still, sleeping under the blanket of unfulfilled desires. It will live again, not in their fulfillment, but in their release. The chains of desire bind, savor pure being that lives again in freed breath. For the truth of being is, you live eternally, shiny and new, concealed but never touched by the traumas and losses of the world, only to be experienced when you truly forgive and again awaken to the truth of who you are. Love restored. And as we experience that love in form, we fulfill the ancient call to reunite as we extend ourselves to all the world. So breathing that in with you and recognizing that it is the codependent dynamic that causes the appearance of the loss of the experience of ourselves as conscious active present love. It is the breath that frees us from these unconscious dynamics. There oftentimes is a tinge of, or perhaps even an extended experience of a deeper pain, but that's allowing yourself to be in that, to feel that, to be with that as you practice being in that connected state of present love is how you free yourself of those dynamics. Remember that the master solvent for everything to do with trauma, for every power person dynamic, for every hate, for every rage, for every fear, is the flowing presence of love delivered by the breath through one's physiology. And the question comes from Melissa. I've done a bunch on the power people in my life from my childhood. As I work on myself and track things back to my power person, such as my father, that's fairly easy to recognize. I was with or married to a man for years that was practically the same person as my dad. Yeah, that's the resonant, the the beauty of course, it can be pretty heavy duty because it just replicates the whole power person dynamic. The beauty is it gives us the opportunity one more time to clean up. The reason why, you know, if you haven't heard me say it before, my kind of my favorite tongue-in-cheek line about what people call love relationships in the world is that they're relationships based in matching bags of garbage. And the very same relationship that can send you to hell if you refuse to be responsible for your bag of garbage is the very relationship that can uplift you if you both take the tools and use them together. So I'm noticing as I trace some of my own issues back, some go through my ex, then back to my dad, but some stop at my ex. Guess my question is, while I've done worksheets on my life with my ex, should I be focusing on the ex as a power person more? Well, here would be, remember there are three things that cause the unconscious action of placing a power person dynamic in your mind. If these three things occur, now you've heard me say it before, usually it's between a parent and a child. But I remember one gentleman that I did some work with, was doing some private work with, and he was in his 70s, and he was in a store that was robbed, and the robber held a gun to his head. And I mean, it's 70 years of age. Bingo, the whole power person dynamic was put into his mind. And this raging attacker with the gun, he became a raging attacker, which was not his style of living or expressing, but it came to place in his mind. So if these three things happened in your relationship with your former spouse, then yes, absolutely, I take the whole power person dynamic and go to work on it. And the three things are, were there times when he had more power over your life than you did, or perhaps continuously? And sadly, that's something that, there's a big part of this culture that's where women have freed themselves from that. There's a big part of the culture that's trying to put women back under the thumb, and it's the first step in creating codependence. So if he had more power over your life than you did, he was not functioning as a human being, i.e., he was not functioning as love, as we're designed to. Then the third factor, so if those two things are accurate, and the third factor was, in your mind, was this a threat to your survival, either physical, mental, emotional, or psychological, or financial? If those three things occurred, he had more power, was not functioning as love, and you perceived it as survival, then yes, he would be a power person. And I would take all of the power person tools. I'd start doing that power person worksheet, do the long form, that new 19-page worksheet. It's on the website. If you don't have it, it's under other worksheets. And absolutely put it to work. And if there's any way we can support you, if there are specifics that you'd like some support with, you're certainly welcome to push the call button, and we could get into more specifics if that would be helpful. Would be delighted to do that. So I hope that that makes sense. And if you're wondering about the pauses, we're still doing troubleshooting on the app, and in order to reset the app, I restart it so that I can keep up with you. So if I seem to go missing for a moment, that's what's happening, and we're working on correction. So the objective is to be restored to come back into alignment with ourselves and be restored so that this flow of love that is literally human life moves through the cellular structure of your body, or what we call your body. You know, if I have, let's say, a challenge with my signal coming into my TV, I can't say to the TV, or I can't say to the antenna, would you try harder? Would you just tighten your jaw, hold your breath, and see if you can give me a push through a better signal? Not going to happen. What am I going to do if I want to get a stronger signal coming in through my antenna? Well, I'm going to make sure the antenna is structured properly. I'm going to make sure the antenna is oriented properly. I'm going to make sure that my television is tuned to that particular antenna. And each increment in a higher level of attunement is going to improve the signal that I get into my TV, and my sound and my picture are going to improve. In essence, what this work is about is upgrading your instrument. You know, the TV, the antenna are an instrument. This work is about literally tuning and upgrading your instrument, removing the energetic blocks that tend to reflect, and you start looking back, their generational patterns. And the main tool for that is forgiveness. Again, forgiveness being a way to go inside of self and remove that which is out of alignment with the truth of who we are. But it isn't effort that accomplishes this, it's alignment. So there are several things that need to be aligned to get back to and achieve true personal power. And in doing that, to truly fulfill one's purpose. Remember that perception is a construct of the mind. It is nothing but the output of the mind. The pictures that we see with our mind are literally generated by our brains. If that doesn't make sense to you, I suggest you get on YouTube and do a search for a presentation, a TED Talk actually, put in TED Talk in the search engine, and Anil, Anileth. Anil Seth is a neuroscientist, and he does a beautiful job of showing the fact that we're not seeing with our eyes, we see with our brain, and the images that we see are made up by our brain based on information we hold. And that perceptual system is the servant of purpose. If you have a purpose and a goal, everything that your mind uses to produce its perception, like let's say you live in a world where I just have to make sure that everybody else is to blame and I'm an innocent victim, then your mind will create an endless series of pictures that will seem to be true to you, that you are an innocent victim, that you have nothing to do with what's going on in your life, and that it's all everybody else's fault. And then you realize that goals, only data consistent with goals, can be reliably served up by carbon-based memory. And so there are a number of things ultimately that need to be aligned to be restored to the truth of who we are. And that state of who we are is what we would call an awakened being. And to be an awakened being, one of the first things you need to know is what your purpose is. Because if your perception of purpose is off base, then your mind's behaviors will be reflective of a corresponding state of being off base. So I'm going to offer, here are the best conclusions I've come to. Check them out, see if they fit for you. And if they do, put them to work. But we each, every one of us has a primary purpose. It's the same for every human being. We each have a secondary purpose. We actually do a whole workshop called Purpose, Personal Power, and Commitment. We, of course, have a worksheet for that. And you want to realize what your primary and secondary purpose is. Your primary purpose, I offer, and this comes from working with thousands of people over the years, is the same as mine. That is, one, to develop a viable, conscious, spiritual body. That body is made of, is created from active present love. So the second step in your primary purpose is to live as love, to improve in wisdom, to live in contact with eternal truth. Now, if your mind's got different ideas, well, I don't care. I'll just, whatever the culture's doing, I got friends and they, are kind of nasty and hostility and fear. I just kind of go along with the crowd. Well, okay. So now you're out of alignment with your true purpose, your primary purpose. And so, and most people don't even realize they have a primary or secondary purpose. So it's like if you ask them what their purpose is, they'll make something up. They'll say something, but it's not something they've created. It's just something it's kind of a combination of my life experience and what my power person dynamic is, what my family system has done. But ultimately, your purpose in being is to really come into harmony with and in contact with eternal truth based in love. And part of doing that is to create a vision of something other than the degraded guidance that much of the culture has given us. So to live according to a higher vision, these are the things that need to be aligned. Understanding of purpose. And then you'll remember when they said to Yeshua, what's most important in this thing you're calling the law? Now, law, be clear, please, is not, when I use that word, I am not using the Greek degraded idea of law being the rule of a superior, and the superior is the king, and the king says, these are the rules, and you're going to live by them, or you're in trouble. And of course, the theologies have made up a Greek story about the creator saying, yes, and the creator's really peeved with you because you're not following the authority. That's totally fake. But they said, yes, well, how do we get this on track? He said, first order of business. He didn't say love your neighbor and love God as yourself. What he said was have Rahma, an idea that does not even exist. There are not words for it in the English language. There are no words for it in Latin. There are no words for this idea in Greek, the languages with which the scriptures have been handed down to us. It was said and taught in Aramaic. So Rahma, it turns out, is a filter in the frontal lobes of the brain. Like, this is a radically new idea in our Greek-oriented culture. And when that filter and gateway is active, when it's open, it is literally the energetic entry point for your human life, for love to show up in your form. So Rakma becomes first. And then there's a second word in Aramaic that there's no idea of such an idea in the English language or the languages we inherited the scriptures from. And that second word, and this is another piece of alignment, is Kuba. How do you align this thing if you don't even have words for it? You don't even know they exist. And no wonder the culture is so bizarre and so insane. And people are starving to death and murdering each other. And I mean, doing the craziest stuff you can imagine. If Rachma and Kuba, Rachma is a filter over intentions that allows only intentions keyed to love to be used by your mind as a raw material for goals. It is a gateway through which love enters your human form. Kuba, second word in Aramaic, is a corresponding filter over the back of the brain where perception is stored. And if those two, Rachma and Kuba, are active in your mind, then your mind will produce accurate human fruit. The result you'll produce will be that of a human life. Most people think, oh, if one has a human form, then they have a human life. No, having a human form does not mean there is any human life in there. Again, human life is love flowing through a cell. If one is in a human form and love is not flowing through their cellular structure, you're not looking at a human life, just a human form. So when they said, what's most important if you're going to be a human being? You've got to have Rockman and Kuba. You've got to understand that that's how your mind produces this human fruit, this life called human. And then with your goals, you've got to have proper targets. You want to make sure that you're willing to honor truth above all else. Most humans have lies in their minds. They call their lies truth. They fill their minds with lies. And by doing so, truth bounces off of them. You got to be willing to honor truth. And then there's this feminine elemental force that was spoken about by Yeshua that is in us called Ruka Dekudsha. And that produces the presence of love. That's the support system. And we could say the super processor that when we invite it into activity, Ruka Dekudsha, they're the words that the Greeks translated as the Holy Spirit. It's got nothing to do with the spirit, disembodied spirit being. It's got nothing to do with religion. Is what Yeshua taught was that there is a feminine elemental force in us that, when invited into activity, will undo the effects of our errors and teach you the truth. You don't have to do this on your own. You don't have to figure it out on your own. When you start to harmonize with this elemental force, you will literally be told in words the truth about your own process. This is the only place you will find the ultimate teacher. It is inside of you. It isn't out here. It isn't me. It isn't Yeshua. It isn't Moses. It isn't Muhammad. It isn't, Elijah. It isn't any of them. Yeshua said, you can deny me, but don't deny the one I came to connect you with. There is a power in you that will guide you and teach you and heal you. Not likely you're ever going to do it on your own. When you're aligned, when your alignment is that far down, now you're down to Rachna and Kuba, and your eternal target is truth, then your mind is going to start to produce accurate perceptions. And I just realized that it's after 2:00. Time, that last 10 minutes went fast. So what I'm going to do is review this tomorrow and continue, because our time is complete. So delightful to have you with us. Appreciate your listening ears. Appreciate you passing it on to others. And ultimately, what we're looking to do is make these tools available to every mind, heart, and being on the planet. Pass it on. Thanks for joining us. Blessings.